And what you're here today is not just to hear about SIG, but more importantly, Level Path and Ace Hardware. I am so excited to have Ace Hardware in the house. We've just had the most amazing chat on how everybody loves Ace, and it's such a great company. But Level Path, I just want you to know about them as well. And with us today is Stan Garber, and he is Level Path CEO and founder. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself. And Froz Bag, who's the Director of Category Management at Ace Hardware. And I am so excited to welcome both of these folks here. So I am going to ask Froz, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, and Stan, you too?
Absolutely. So first on, thank you for having me on. I know SIG is a wonderful organization with a lot of resources that are available for procurement professionals. So really appreciate the space that you guys operate and all the knowledge that you guys bring forth. So
Yeah.
with that, no, I'm excited to be a part of this dialogue and conversation with Stan. Just as a way of introduction, I lead the category management and operations team here at ACE. So across multiple categories, reporting up to our director of indirect procurement, and within the finance organization. So really just, I think as we, talk through this dialogue and conversation, I think it's good for the audience to kind of understand the lens that we operate through. So I've been with ACE for 12 years now. Really started, helped with Lee Barbeau start up the indirect procurement group at ACE. So really started with IT and taking a look at that spend. And over the 12 years, here I am in this seat today. So a lot of wealth of experience from both the category management side and then the operations piece that we'll get into today. Previous to my current role here within ACE, I spent a lot of time in sales and consulting, which really gives me a different perspective as we work within the indirect procurement space. So thank you for having me. Excited to have this conversation. Stan?
Yeah, well, Froz, that's a great intro. And the fact that you were in sales I can safely say he does use those skills against me when we've worked on our agreement. So Don, thank you for having us. So myself, I'm Stan Garber, one of the co-founders of Level Path, and we're very excited to partner up with the SIG organization. As Don said, we're going to be with you all year long in many events and some webinars and others. So very excited to be part of this conversation set. So real quick on our side, so I'm one of the founders. I've had a chance. We're going to talk about our background in some detail here real quick. I'm also I think I've got access to the slides now, so there we go. Cool. So we'll go walk through some of these as well here. But one of the founders of Level Path, I've had the chance to work with my other co-founder, Alex, for the last 20 years together. And we're going to talk a little bit about our journey, what we're doing here at Level Path. But overall, on the whole track today on the conversation side, here we go. And I think I can learn how to use a PowerPoint. Perfect. All right, we're good. So today we're going to have a pretty active conversation. We crushed the intros. We're going to talk a little bit about the Level Path journey to sort of help up tee up the framework of the chat of what we're doing with Ace Hardware. Then, since it is the new year, still January, we thought there's a good opportunity. Gartner puts out a predicts paper just to talk through those topics. And Froz and I are going to go back and forth a little bit there. And then we're going to dive deep within Ace and how their journey from a transformation from technology, people, everything, all those good topics. And we'll end with some Q&A. So designed to be very interactive for between Froz and myself. Maybe Don will pull you into a question too. You never know. And then please enter some questions. We'll have some time at the end to go through this. But let's jump into it and have some fun here, folks. All right, a little bit how we got here. I'm gonna take lead here. So Froz, relax for a few minutes. I'm gonna take lead here. Feel free to jump at any point though to talk a little bit how we got here. And the journey with it. It's an unusual path, but they all are stitched together in a great story, which I like to sometimes tell. And from how we got there, ultimately, we've been in the procurement industry for over a decade. We started with a company. Many of you might have known there's a company called Scout RFP. We started that in 2014. So I'm one of the founders of that organization. We started Scout with a very simple mission. Painless RFPs. Previous to this, we had built a company that did online ordering for restaurant chains. And we had filled out a ton of RFPs through email, Excel, Word, and others. And we're like, there's got to be a simpler and easier process to do this. And that's this idea of Scout was, hey, can we take the RFP process and make it simpler? And we launched in 2014. We didn't know much about procurement at that time, other than, hey, we could solve this, or we could help make the process simpler on running our FX events. So we launched in 14. By 2019, Scout had grown into a pretty large organization, almost 250 global customers, almost 200 people, growing at a really fast clip. And we had a chance to partner up with Workday in 2018, just from a partnership standpoint. And very quickly, we saw a lot of ways to work together. In 2019, we actually joined forces where Workday acquired us. And this sort of gave us a whole new level of a new lens on the world. We got to join Workday late 2019, which is an amazing organization, 15,000 plus people. At Scout, we were sub 200. And what happened? A few things happened. One, it gave us a platform to go talk to many big organizations, many CPOs of big companies. And we got to really see and witness what the buying process was. And then we also got to be the other fun part I like to say, I get to become an individual of the procurement process now, a stakeholder, and got to understand Workday is a 15,000 person company. So I need to buy stuff. You know what I realized ultimately talking to these organizations, big, small, and being part of the process, buying in big companies is complicated. And the idea with Level Path, and we left in 22 to work on this idea. And ultimately, what we saw and felt when we started talking to big organizations, with Scout, we focused on a piece, but when you need to go buy stuff yourself in big companies, you want to do the right thing always. But the reality, sometimes you have to jump this big canyon. And as a stakeholder, you're like, where do I go to buy something? Things are just sometimes a little more complicated because ultimately we all have an intranet page, but when was the last time we updated it or went through and actually looked at that information set? We all have different folks that need to approve things. We all have and just as you go through it, do we have a preferred supplier for virtual event software? Yeah, you probably have 3 of them, but do I know which one? No. I need to buy swag for a different, for Europe, for example. Do I know my preferred supplier? I didn't know these things myself, so I had to go. There's a lot of tribal knowledge, all this information. So you kind of feel you got to jump this process to get into the buying request process. But then it gets even more interesting when you are in the process of like, okay, I'm talking, let's actually get going. You quickly realize you're like, where do I need to go now? Who's working on it? Is it legal? Is it finance? Is it procurement? Do I have all the information from the suppliers? So it just there's many things that need to happen. And it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just we're in a process. And what we want to try to do is make that better. But the reality is this is where we live today. And the outcome, the results, sometimes unhappy stakeholders, which I've experienced myself in the past, increased cost or risk just ultimately because you're not going through the procurement process right away. And then ultimately just some control or lack of visibility for it. Probably things I'm not saying new, but our mission at Scout was this idea of painless RPs. But when you look at this and where we want to go with next, we kind of joke, if you're ever in our San Francisco office, Froz, you've been there, right? You've taken a photo. We've done this together, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. No, I do remember that sign. It's hard to forget.
It's hard to forget. As soon as you walk right into our doors, there's a big, delightful procurement. And that's our mission here at Level Path. We want to bring this idea of delightful procurement to the masses. And where does this start with? And, our unique approach and how we think about the world here. When you think about delightful procurement, we kind of wanted to start with these 3 fundamental principles. Number 1, power of simplicity. And what we mean by this, and we're obviously not going to go too much deeper into the actual product set today, but the idea of let's get users to the right set of information when they need to. And the first iteration, we called it Pathfinder. We developed it's literally in the name, designed to get users to the right path. Whether it's to an existing product you might have, an existing supplier, or punching them out to a form or document. No training needed. It's something you could deploy and get folks to be interactive. It's bringing the procurement process, your internet page that, Froz, do you guys have a manual today, like a procurement policy that you've put out and codified?
We do have a procurement policy, yes.
Yeah, and every company you talk to has that procurement policy. And when I talked to, I was in a room even with like with a CPO and a CIO, and I was like, do you have a policy? They're like, yes. I'm like, have you read it? They're like, we actually haven't. I was like, okay, no folks do this. How do you map and bring that to life? That's how we think about it with this first version of Pathfinder in the product, and then everything is stitched together. So it's an end-to-end flow product, putting this all from, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then the most important part of that is the implementation. Hand-holding our customers from the front door to the pre-planning, the implementation side, and then actually going live with everybody, like all going together. So just that really customer interaction delight doesn't come from just software. It's working with great partners to it. And where the product is today, and we've been at it for just under 2.5 years as a company. A lot of progress in where the product fundamentally, and I'm not going to spend much time on here because we're going to get into some meatier parts of the conversation, but just to give you a sense where the platform is today, we started with this front door approach, the first parts of source to contract, and then we're going to keep evolving. So you can see right now, there's a little bit open on the right-hand side. Those are for anybody curious to learn a little bit more, happy to talk through it. But these are just some of the elements of where the application in today is and where we're going to go with it too. So these are, and Froz, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things you're doing today within Level Path too. So that's a little bit of background on who Level Path is, myself and my journey. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. And Froz, I thought we'd pull you into this conversation and, let's chat for a few seconds on 2025 predictions. You and I have gone to a lot of trade shows. You and I have been talking for technically like a solid 7-8 years now at this point. But
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first time you showed up, I sent you to the wrong building. So
that was actually a hilarious journey. Yes, it was freezing in Chicago. I was ill prepared being based out of San Francisco. And at that time, their HQ was spread between 4 or 5 buildings. And so I went to, about 15 minutes of wandering around till someone said, "Where are you looking for, sir?" So yeah, that was a good start. But Gartner came out with their 2025. They do this every year. And we love to just take a peek at this thing. If you want to scan the QR code, there's a link to it. You can get it off. We'll also send a follow-up too. But their predicts, it's about almost 25-page report. Their 2025 predictions for just general and the topics that, really the meaty, there's 4 meaty topics out of it. One, AI and some of the challenges that it actually has present with the data around it. Emergence of AI agents, which I think is kind of fun because you have one side that's talking about the challenges and one side that's talking about the future, workforce evolution, and supplier risk and governance. And they're all interconnected, I think, fundamentally. One of the first topics, though, which caught my eye is, we've been talking about, and Froz, I think when you and I started talking 2 years ago, AI is just a conversation across the board, always any topic you ever jump on, it's a point. And, interesting data points. So they put out in this predicts paper, 68% of CPOs are prioritizing investments in AI and generative AI, which, can't argue with that. We're all thinking about it. But 49% cite that data accuracy and reliability is a major challenge. So poor data governance and low maturity of the data, it's actually hindering them to actually roll out and see some of that AI implications with that. Now, one of the things would love to, and I know we're going to get into a little bit more details on ACE, but thoughts on that, universally, you talked to your peers, what do you see around that idea?
Yeah, no, I think Stan, how you framed it up, in terms of just, a couple of years ago, right? Folks had asked hey, what do you think about AI? And I remember sitting out in front of one of the conferences stating that's not tangible, right? But you fast forward a year from now and, it's real, we utilize it today. And I think, when we get into it with Level Path, right? One of the reasons why, we're working with you guys, right, is just the technology that you guys are building, right, from the ground up. And so I do feel like today it is very tangible. There are organizations that are utilizing it today, right? The chat GPTs of the world. But now as it evolves and it's being built into applications, right, you can actually use generative AI and then, talk about the agents piece of it. That's going to be upcoming as well. So it is real today. And so I'm not surprised by these stats when you shared them with me earlier in the week.
Yeah, no, everybody's talking about it. But the one thing that caught my eye when I was looking at this is the challenges what you get is everybody's like, let's do it. But the problem is everybody's data siloed. And whether it's in different applications or in different functions. So when you want to try to use some insights and going through that, the information is kind of it's spaghetti. It's kind of all over the place here. And the craziest data point is, and I was kind of shocked by this. By 2028, 60% of CPOs are expected to fail to realize the anticipated value of advanced analytics and governance issues based on the fact that information, just they have to spend a bunch of time to going back to that data point. So that was just a eye-opening like stat when I kind of looked at it from what they put out there. Now at the
Yeah, I
same
mean, I think Stan, like I think like as I talk to my peers, right? Like people talk about good data and bad data, and I don't know if there's good data or bad data. It's just data, but like, how do you make that data actionable, right? How do you bring it to life quickly? Is I think our focus has been, and again, like I'm sure we'll talk about a couple of the things that we're doing with enriching the data through the platform, but what I thought, would take lots and lots of effort, right, associated with doing some of the work at looking at our data, leveraging the tool sets that exist in the marketplace. You can do that much more efficiently and quickly. Yeah, so I think we're going to talk about that later on, but
We will, yeah, for sure.
yeah,
No, one of the things that the report puts together, which I kind of love this time,
yeah,
it's basic challenges because the data is fragmented. What it's trying to emphasize is this is a golden opportunity for procurement as you're looking to bring all the supplier information, others. Like now is a golden opportunity to go work with these cross-functional departments, legal, IT, infosec, privacy, and to start talking about like bringing that information together in a more succinct way. It's a forcing mechanism because if you want to utilize things like Gen AI and other these, like it's an opportunity to meet with these leaders because sometimes like they've all lived in silos, but now if you want to use that for insights, it's an opportunity to go back as even though there's challenges around it, it's also a golden opportunity for us to, not to say that the seat, have a seat at the table idea, like 'cause we
yeah,
always talk about that at every event we go to, but it's a forcing mechanism to bring that together. I just thought that was a really interesting
yeah.
point, and I know you're doing that at ACE today. Like you are not just doing this in a silo, you are bringing in many parts of the business into the conversation.
No, absolutely. And I think it takes a village and support from top down, right? And so I think when you actually are able to bring the data to life, right? Other department gets excited about it as well, right? So we're working with our AP team pretty closely looking at some of the data elements. And then when we show them, here's what we can do with this, right? It creates that excitement amongst the cross collaborative group. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now
Yeah.
let's talk about for a second agents, right? It's a conversation. We'll talk maybe a little bit more as we get into AI specifically, but this idea of agents, it's kind of fun. We went through the evolution, right? You kind of went through and we just had our customer event at end of November, and I don't have my shiny gold silver shirt on, Froz, but if you remember, I had my agent shirt on because it was an interesting idea. We were talking about it. And
Yep.
the evolution of AI kind of went from you had this automatic AI really in call it 2010s to even 2022 really, where it's
Machine
algorithms
learning,
behind.
more machine learning, right? Like, would you call it
Right.
that? Yeah,
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 yeah. So
yeah,
it's these algorithms running behind the scenes, looking at all this data, and then really the main thing they were printing money for the ad engines, right? Because it's like, how do you know you needed this item at this very time?
yep,
Which was great. And then in 22, OpenAI created this open to the world. They didn't solely were the only ones that doing it, but created ChatGPT and this idea of, hey, how do you summarize and create Gen AI? And like now you can summarize, you can OCR information in a very different way. You can do simple math. You can do all these things through more of a generative process. And that was really neat. And now you have this idea of agents. And really the whole concept here, what we're doing is saying, hey, it's a task oriented. So it's automation now. You're actually using Gen AI to now go out and actually perform certain tasks. And here's some interesting data points. By 2028, Gartner predicts 40% of procurement teams will have implemented at least one AI agent, automating traditional procurement tasks and enhancing a shift to more strategic activities. Now, when you think through that, like Froz, like how are you guys? What do you see as good? Like, what are some of the tasks you'd love to get automated? And we've
Y-
talked about agents now for a little bit with you.
yeah. I mean, I think for us, right? Again, the mindset is like, how do we arm our team with the information to be more actionable and drive impact, right? And so I think when we think about potentially, utilizing agents, it's, we've all been through an RFP where we get, 8 proposals, 100 pages each, right? And I think not too long ago, right, we had to sit there, review it, put a summarization together for our stakeholders to have a conversation
Yeah.
around that. And, that can impact, how you staff your team, that can impact, where you put your time and effort, right? Any given week associated with one RFP, and you multiply that across, 50, 60, 70 RFPs, right? It's very time consuming. And so when I think about agents, right, and where I'm excited in terms of, what you guys are building and where the industry's going is being able to capture that, right, within one tool set. And then really, once the information's there, being able to, ask it questions, right, as opposed and ask it to put down or put together summarizations. And so, that's the line of thinking, because now what we've done is taken something that takes, multiple weeks to be able to put together and talk to stakeholders about. And if all the information is centrally housed in a secure environment, right? Like we're able to have that information at our fingertips within minutes. So yeah, really excited
And
about where that trend is going.
yeah, and this idea of like one agent concept,
Yeah.
it's kind of nice because it breaks down because you can build purpose-built agents like to what's Froz was just talking about is this idea
Yeah.
of like basically a sourcing agent, right? You can so it goes through analyze, you could do then agents for different tasks where and the ultimate aspirational dream that we want to move to is like a procurement agent, that front door conversation where you can get to where you can have help a user funnel through the process. But the beginning wave are just tasks or very small things you want to automate. And that's the way we approach all of this. Like, how do you take current tasks that you and the team are doing and just creating actions around it or automatic steps or being able to kick off workflows from it? That's the foundation of what an agent will be. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that, which is neat.
Yeah,
Now,
and I'm excited about the procurement community, right? Because I think, you know, that allows us to interface with our stakeholders and really drive the business forward, right? As opposed to spending gobbles of time analyzing. And so I'm really excited about the impact that, that brings to the table in terms of the impact procurement teams can have within the organization.
and to that point though, the other point is the workforce prediction, right? Where you're just ultimately and would love to because you and I have because you've added even since the last 2 years, you've added some team members onto your group, and it's just harder to find more talent, right? So if you could free up talent, just your thoughts around like how that will actually help with talent overall.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think we're a lean organization in terms of the team itself, but the impact we make is very strategic within ACE, right? And so as I think about bringing skilled folks over to the team, it's allowing them to focus on the strategic aspects of things as opposed to the tactical. So I remember a year ago when we were at one of the Connect events, right? And you guys had showed the supplier enrichment and what you can do with their supplier data. And I joked with my team member. I was like, like, you're fired, right? Because I thought
I
it was going to
remember
take
I remember that vividly. You paused and said in front of the whole team in a joking way, of course.
in a
But
joking
like
way.
we did this literally together where we just took and this is diving into some slides here in just a little bit, but like we just opened up like an interface to show the team and we're like, let's add was it 20 suppliers we got
Yep,
together and we said
yep.
let's break this information up, right, Froz? And we're like, Froz, like what are the things you care about? Like I need categorization, I need descriptions, I need this. And we just asked those questions of the prompt engine to go through and it populated all that in what, like 30 seconds? We did it together in a few minutes.
It did. And I think, Stan, your original question about talent management, right? I think what, obviously I said that jokingly, but what that allowed us to do is not really spend, 30% of our time till the end of the year focused on bringing this data together and really take that time and reallocate it to strengthening those relationships and building that cross collaboration with the stakeholders that we work with that actually, drives behavior and drives the business forward. So, from a talent management perspective, I think it's, giving the folks the right tools to be, very skilled professionals to be able to do their job more effectively here at ACE. So that, yeah, super exciting stuff.
Yeah. And with that, I think it's kind of an important. So and there's a lot of good meaty details, stuff
Yeah.
that I'm not going to hit on in this report, but it just there's a lot there's good and bad with everything. And I think it's always important to talk through and bring these up. But Fraza, to your point, let's jump into it a little bit and talk
Yeah.
about ACE and the transformation. And I know right before this webinar, we even started talking about, everybody was like, Ace is such an amazing and iconic brand, and we all have some emotional story that talks about, I could tell you I live here in the city in San Francisco, and no joke, I think within a 5-minute drive, there's 3 Ace hardwares. And so I find myself at Ace pretty often. And the funniest part, my kids who are 5'9", one of the aces, not too far away, has got a few lanes of toys in it. So their view that when they say, "Can I go to the toy store?" they're actually saying, "Can I go to an Ace Hardware store here in the city for us?" Which I love, which I love, you know what I mean? Would
Yeah,
love to. Why don't we, like, I don't know if folks
yeah.
even realize how big Ace is and the depth of the. So would love for you to maybe take a few minutes just talk about Ace.
Yeah, no, Stan, I love hearing those stories and my face smiles up every single time. I'm fortunate to be a part of this just great organization and the experience, right, as we were talking before this thing kicked off, the experience that you guys have with ACE, that's really bred in the culture, even at the up to the corporate level. So yeah, I mean, ACE, what most people don't realize is that we are a co-op. And our mission is really just to be the best, most helpful hardware store on the planet. And so everything that we do here on the corporate side to, support the retailers to make an impact within their communities, right? That's what we're focused on. But, I've been here for 12 years. Today I think we're north of 6,000 stores across 70 different
6,000
countries.
stores, the logistics of 6,000 stores. I mean, and I've
Yeah.
been to those stores. There is no shortage of stuff in those stores.
Yeah, and so at our core, right, to be able to get that inventory into the stores, we're a wholesale distribution company. And so that's kind of our core focus. And with that, right, like I think, some of the things that you might not know about Ace just recently, right? We are entered the home services business as well. And so that's a division of a subsidiary of Ace that we're continuing to invest in and grow. What I'm most proud of, right? Like we're always ranked really high in customer service, and 16 out of the last 17 years for JD Power. But one of the things that really resonates with me is just, and we don't talk about it just because that's who it is in our DNA, is just all the money across ACE and our retailers. And our communities that are raised for the charitable arm that we help support with CMN hospitals. So that's one of the things that really just resonates with me. It's a great organization, and we could probably spend an hour just
Well,
talking
you
about ACE and how grateful I am to be a part of the organization.
100%.
Yeah.
Two things. Number one, you also have one of the strongest swag games I've ever seen for any corporate company. I think I've never seen Froz not wearing in, like, you think when tech companies have swag, I don't think I've ever seen Froz not in swag that says Ace on there. I even went to their offices and they had a swag store where I got a pair of socks and I think Alex got a shirt that says Ace. So whenever he's walking around with that, people come up to him, ask him a question, which I think is funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, and so no, that's I appreciate you calling that out. So American Needle is we have a lot of our swag up, and actually I believe that you can buy a lot of the swag at a lot of the mall stores as well now. So, but if
okay,
you're
there you
interested,
go.
AmericanNeedle.com. Yep.
Well, one of the things you mentioned to me also, and we'll actually start talking more about transformation in just a minute, but like
Yeah.
you guys have a series, like an actual documentary series on Apple TV now too, about what like ACE employees do. Talk to me about that. That is just that is cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So no, so about we were coming up on 100 years, which we celebrated last year. So Ace is a 100-year-old company, and as we were heading towards that milestone, I think our CMO and marketing leadership, right, really want to share the stories within the communities and the impact that the Ace stores have. And so really wanted to bring that to light because that's, who we are at our core. And so yeah, no, if you go to Apple TV, I believe it's come into a couple other distribution networks as well, but you can find Hardware Stories, which shares,
I like that.
we've done
It's
them in
cute.
all 50 states. So there's stories across the board, and definitely pull out your tissues because they really tug at you in terms of the emotional impact that we have to our community. So yeah, it's pretty neat to be a part of just a great organization.
And one of the things that I loved, and so when we started working together, Froz, like just a few years ago, I remember you and I were catching up. You brought Lee onto the call, your director,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I just remember, this idea of continuous improvement culture,
Yep.
right? And I think it's also generated through this constant like ACE helpful mentality, that's part of your mantra, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I would, maybe take it a step back of, when we got together, I remember when Lee was like, "Hey, like we want to be a better partner to as she's helped you both have helped build the organization, and maybe take a minute also talk a little bit about the organization itself." And then when you and I started speaking about 2 years ago, as we were starting to even think about Level Path, because you and I spoke before we even wrote a line of code of Level Path, I think so. I had a design of like what I think a future product could even look like, right?
Yeah.
And you were taking a look at it at that time, but like you were already talking about like this idea of we need to do constant improvement within the business. Take me back there. Like, give me a little bit more to what you were thinking about.
Yeah. So I'll take us back to sort of the beginning. So I think previous to Level Path, we were a customer of Scout. And so there was a lot of history there in terms of, leveraging the RFP tool, the user interface, and why we selected that product many years ago. And I think, as Lee and I, I think Stan, as you approached us, as we had chatted about, you know, hey, you had a vision of like, hey, we're thinking about this, right? How does that fit into what ACE is seeking to solve for? And so as we had chatted internally, right, like I think one of the things that we were really interested in is just like continuously kind of evaluating the marketplace to understand what's going on within the marketplace, right? And certainly with kind of the pedigree and the background that you guys have was we're very interested in seeing what vision that you guys were trying to bring to life. And I think, yeah, Stan, I don't know if you guys had actually developed anything at that point, but as you guys chatted about like what are your problems, right? Like what are your problem statements here within, that we can help you solve for? And one of the things, and it was perfect timing too, right? Because one of the paths that we were on is taking a look at being a distribution company, helping support our distribution team around, sourcing and transparency. And so I think, for us, it was really important to ensure that, as we engage with stakeholders, right, as inputs come into our process, and we're engaging with the different stakeholders within ACE that ultimately help get something accomplished, right? We really want to bring transparency to that and collaboration, right? And take it out of the world of just emails back and forth or, providing email updates, right? So what we were thinking about is really just, providing greater transparency. I think as we looked at our tool sets here within ACE, right? Like I think we always want to improve efficiency, right? Like it's real easy to say, hey,
Yeah.
something's, there's always going to be stuff out there, right? But we really want to leverage our systems and processes to improve that efficiency in terms of how we work. And then I think we touched on this a little bit, right? But we have a lot of data elements, right? Like any big, large or small organization is going to have a lot of data, but like, how do we actually like make that actionable and bring that to life to really help, again, drive the business forward? And so I think, we were looking at our supplier data, right, at the time, specifically around distribution and with 17 distribution centers and a lot of spend across those distribution centers, right? Like, how do we take that supplier data and learn from it and help guide our distribution folks on where and how to spend? Because those
And
folks, right, like they're actually, they're loading up the trucks and getting them out to our retailers, right? So we wanted to take, as we work with that team, take that work off of their plate and make
so
it super easy for them. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is you perfectly segue into how did we start working together and the use case we found around that. So one of the things I remember you
Yeah.
sat down and you were like, hey, one of the things that we want to try to tackle is we've got 16 distribution centers across the country.
Yep.
They need to, how do they work with procurement? To your point, they're handling all of the volume, they're putting it out. And this became a conversation where I think you came to me and like, hey, we need to open up a front door. We need to open up this way for these distribution centers. Whether like I think I remember it's like they need a new piece of hardware, they need janitorial services, they need capital expenditure processes. Like, how do we help them do that? How do we help them organize that, go through bidding, the front door experience? You were trying to centralize that process because it was happening. Sometimes it was happening right at that level, and you were being brought into late into the process. They weren't necessarily utilizing corporate procurement to do some of those things. So this is where this conversation of like, hey, maybe a solution provider or a new way to do things became. And walk us through a little bit of like why, like the
Yeah.
use case that you kind of wanted to tackle specifically when I remember you and Lee started talking to me about this, the specific
Yeah.
use case and like what you went out and started looking through the products and what, and I guess, not
Yeah.
going to say anything new. We're obviously working together, so we know where that went. But
Yep.
like why Level Path was a good foundation for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time that we engage, right? Like we had just gotten a couple headcounts to help support the 17 distribution centers. And we knew, right, like two people are not enough, right? So what we really want to do was streamline the process in terms of how those folks engage with indirect procurement. And so, over the last year and a half, right, Kevin and Matt, who are the folks supporting the distribution center, right, like that was the front door. So we built a relationship with our stakeholders, but then we also leveraged LevelPath to be the engagement into indirect procurement. And so with that, right, like what we were able to do is streamline some of the way they engage and interact with us through the process and having visibility as to where things are, right? So now an FM, right, can potentially be on the floor, request something with the app, right? And then, 2 weeks later, kind of see like where are things, right? Like where are things in the process? So what we really want to do was like simplify and provide them visibility in terms of how they're engaging with us. And then also, it be able to continue to build that platform along our journey, right? And so I think at the time, as you mentioned, right, you guys hadn't written a piece of code, but you had this front door that we can leverage to bring folks in. And so we leverage that. It's been going super well, right? And I think, leveraging some of the other modules as you guys have been putting them out into the marketplace, right? So, um, you know, having the supplier piece, right? We touched upon that earlier, but what was going on at the time was, we had the 17 distribution centers, potentially, each of the distribution centers were utilizing a different vendor. And so like, how do we take that vendor data and bring it to the forefront, right? And so from the category management side, we were focused on, building and enhancing those relationships with our vendor community. But if I'm a FM and I just need to like buy a forklift, right? And now they can go into Level Path, type in the category that they're looking for, and it pops up as like, hey, here's the preferred supplier, right? And why is that important? For us, it's super important because number one, right, like they're not spending a lot of time doing their own research and conversations back and forth. The right data is in front of them at the right time. And then when you think about like the back end process associated with it, we're not setting up, right, like 15 different vendors that do the exact same thing, right? Like having that data right there for them when they need something, the category management team engaging with the stakeholder, right? And like it helps to
And
like drive those conversations right
Ross,
out of the gate. Yeah.
I love that point. And we had another customer, Qualtrics, for example. They saw a 30% decline in the first 60 days of going live from like new supplier requests because you're
Yeah.
always having to deal with like this constant flow of like there's potential suppliers that can do the job. But the problem is you have so many suppliers and just enriching that data set
Mhm.
is hard to do. And you can automate that using AI and a few other pieces there. And that's what we've
Yeah.
done with your set today. But you can see some truth, like it's a cost to manage more and more suppliers. Can you do more business with existing suppliers? Like that's a huge win. Um,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Directing people towards, the supply, the preferred supplier relationships that we're building, right? Like really helps us have really good conversations with our supplier base, right? And then really coach our own internal team, right? Our stakeholders on, the suppliers that are available to them. And so it's really driving efficiencies. And we'll continue to drive this efficiencies as we, seek to, open up that intake to the rest of the organization as well. So the other piece that was really cool, Stan, was the vendor onboarding. And so, you know, um, historically, right, like before indirect procurement was part of the process, our FMs, again, doing a million different things at the warehouse, were trying to be the experts in legal, trying to be the experts in commercials, and trying to find, the right vendor to do something, right? And now leveraging the intake of the vendor onboarding, right? Like our category managers can see, hey, do we need to onboard this vendor and why are we onboarding it, right? And then, helping drive those conversations down the line. And at the end of the day, right, our stakeholders, in this case, distribution managers, right, like just need the right thing at the right time to keep the business running, right? And so we're able to leverage level path and, and continue to improve efficiencies downstream with all the different stakeholders that need to be engaged with the vendor onboarding process. So that's been a win for us internally.
So
And then,
today when I think,
may I interject with just a couple
yeah,
of
Don.
yeah,
for you?
please.
So, first off, to Stan, is this primarily an indirect tool for indirect material tool that LevelPath has created, or can you also use it on direct commodities?
Yeah, great question. It's universal. I mean, we have customers using it on both sides of the equation. Actually, another CPG company out of Chicago just started leveraging it for supply remediation planning on the direct side, where literally they get a shipment, something's off, they can take a photo of it, start a workflow that will kick off this whole entire process of them verifying, taking out to the supplier, get verified. So quite frankly, Don, it's fun because you could do for both. I think you get a lot more indirect because there's a lot more indirect procurement. But by default, both sides can use the product.
Oh, good. And Roz, does ACE
Yeah.
procurement allow the stakeholders to choose their own supplier via the tool?
So not via the tool today. What we want to do is bring to light like what suppliers are available to them without them necessarily reaching out to everybody, right? So if I'm a stakeholder that needs a vendor for texting, right, for whatever your business case is, right, we have preferred relationships in place that have, obviously gone through our internal processes within ACE, and they'll bring it to light as opposed to like, hey, here's the 6 suppliers that are available to you, right? Like, and so it just helps drive decision making and and streamlining operations on the back end.
Okay, and then was it through the use of the tool and data gathering outside the bidding process, were you able to identify key strategic opportunities such as product supplier rationalization or synergies across teams and divisions? And what or how was LevelPath able to help you with these strategic opportunities as a result of the RFP process?
Yeah, I mean, I think how I would answer that question is like a tool is not going to necessarily solve that that complex statement that you
There's
stated,
no
Don,
easy
right?
button on this one. No.
And so I think what it takes is, it takes a village, right? So we're working with our AP, we work with our data sets that are internally, right, available to us with our AP team, cleansing that, right? We're taking a look at, how do we take that data set, right, and enrich it to understand like, and that's where LevelPath fits in is understanding, we have, let's just say a list of 1,000 vendors, right? But they're just names on a spreadsheet, right? Like, how do we take that, enrich the data to understand, like, what are the primary categories those 1,000 suppliers potentially provide, right? And so you get that piece of it. And then you get the piece of it that, are the competitors, right? So that's one of the feature set that exists within the tool is it'll tell you who the competitors are as well, right? And then when you kind of grow that and look at it through the category management lens, right? That's where having that data available to us, right? Our category management team can speak to the suppliers to be able to strategically align and see the spend with the data that's available to us, right? To bring that to light. So, I've been around procurement for a long time, right? That's a problem statement for sure. And there's not a simple answer. And I don't think, Stan, keep me honest, right? But I don't think magically that comes to light. I think there's many pieces of that working cross collaboratively and having a tool that makes it super easy to bring to light and leverages the data that's available to them through AI, right?
Yeah.
To really bring that to help with the decision making process.
100%. And some of these points, one of the last few slides we had here. I mean, it's the transparency and visibility. If you do that, you have a place to collaborate and work. You're just going to do more of that, Don. So by default, those things will come. But it's also, and there's a whole conversation we can have around that.
Okay, so then
Well, Don, anything else or?
yeah, so I just want to go back to Frost just really quickly because I know you've got some other slides to get to. Did you then take the enriched data and put it back into your ERP, or is it out of your ERP system when you went through and looked at it all?
Yeah. So no, it's not in the ERP system. What we did was identify kind of the vendor record, right? Because you may have a vendor that has 15 right? For whatever reason, vendor numbers associated with them. And so we don't go back and touch the ERP. We're taking that data, enriching it, and having it available to us. And we're potentially thinking about, integrations in the future, but it's two different systems.
Okay, perfect. And Stan, I know you've got some other content. One of these days, we might ask Level Path to come in and do a deep dive on your tool itself, because we're getting technical questions. People want to see how the tool works, things like that.
Sure.
And I know this is a thought leadership event,
Right.
but I was just thought I'd mention that to you, but I'm gonna go off screen and you guys take it away again.
No, these are great questions. And yes, and I apologize. Part of our goal was today was a little bit more conversational and less. I know there's some great questions coming in about the product itself and how they're using it. It was designed to be a little bit more high level and not like here's level path at every detail, which don't get me wrong. Froz knows that I am happy to spend a full hour just talking through that. But we've got 10 minutes, but feel free to ask any questions. One thing I want to just take some time is, so when you think about it, just taking a step back, Froz. So where we started with Level Path is the front door experience, opening that up, especially with the distribution centers, mobile first, the ability for them to request things, to guide them, because you're also guiding the actual distributions. Like if they need a capital expenditure process, like here's the process you need to follow. If you need forms, here's where you need to go. It's like very tactical, but very important things that people waste a lot of time. That was like the initial starting point. Then the collaboration and the workflow from I need a request to actually run the process. You've started doing things on the sourcing side now too, where you're actually running, and we talked about some of the things with AI, using actually sourcing to help generate, analyze the bids. And then from there, you're just constantly deploying more of the application. Is anything I missed that you're using today, just at a high level?
Yeah, no, that
Makes
was
you
a
curious.
good quick walkthrough, and we could probably spend an hour talking about each of the different each of the different pills, which you guys call it within the tool, right? But I think one of the things that we see a benefit, and I think you touched on this earlier, right? Like in terms of the use of generative AI, right? Like a couple things that I think are worth mentioning is, having the ability to have the tool generate questions, right? So a lot of times, as I think about the team, right, and we talk about the talent development associated with the team, and we may have an RFP for, let's just call it landscaping services, right? And
Yeah.
there might be someone on the team that's never done a landscaping service before, and it's not something that we do routinely, right? So we don't have a template in place to leverage. But if someone wants to go ahead and do a landscaping service for one of the facilities potentially, right? Like within the tool, you can type in like, hey, I need a bid for landscaping services. And I believe it's Copilot. You can keep me honest here in terms of
It is right now. That's what it's called. Yep.
Yep. But it'll generate, 10 or 15 questions, right? If you're looking for like a quick bid on, hey, I just need this landscaping service twice a year, right? It can generate some questions associated with that. And you can go deeper as well. I'm probably not doing it justice, but we're excited about having that ability within the tool to be able to
And then the
generate.
analysis that goes with it afterwards, where you can ask, because you get all these proposals back through email, Excel, they don't follow the template, or you don't have to even get a template and then analyze it really quickly.
Yeah.
Like,
And
yeah,
it,
and
oh, go ahead.
no. And like that's the power when you think about AI and innovation, adoption of AI. One of the things that gets me just pumped about this space is we can kind of reshape how things are operated today, right? We're very siloed into, hey, here's the RFP template, here's the structure. But what we're saying now, and today what Fraz that you just brought up, you can get quotes, unstructured bids. You can let the software, any like this type of software, scan it, OCR, bring it back, apply a LLM model to it, a large language model, and then being able to actually get feedback back on that in an unstructured way. That's kind of game changing from an efficiency standpoint. There's no more, hey, let me slice and dice the data in Excel for half an hour to half a day to get into format so then my team can review it. You can literally do a few things, just click a button, ask a prompt, and then start engaging the data instantly and massaging it to your liking. It's your own ChatGPT like interface within the different apps that you're going to do it, from project workflow management down to sourcing to others. It's sorry, now I'm getting like excited about talking about this, but like this is the power, and I don't know, like because you have to almost reteach your team a little bit and how to think about this process because they have so much more flexibility now.
Yeah, no, and I think it's we geek out about this quite a bit, and especially from the early conversation. But I think being part of that journey from the early stages, right? Like we're able to, and you guys do a good job of, we provide feedback constantly. And I think you guys working with the rest of the partners that you guys have within the ecosystem to put out feature functionality. I think there's something out every week in terms of new feature functionality that's driven by, the
We are moving
users
fast.
of the tool is pretty cool. And I think the other piece that we're hoping to be able to do is like have reporting right out of the tool that goes up to, my boss and, and our executive team around like, here's all the sourcing events we're working on, but not just that, like, here's all the other project stuff that we're working on that may or may not be a sourcing event. So we're really seeking to leverage the tool for that centralized reporting out to my leadership team and the executive team as well. So, yeah, no, we're pretty excited about that, and I know you guys are building some stuff downstream with the tool. But with 5 minutes left, I'm happy to take a quick pause, Dan, and
Yeah,
see
Don,
if there's any
any other
questions coming
questions or
in.
anything that's coming in? Just want to be mindful.
Yeah. So anecdotally, what is the size client that level path would be appropriate? Top line revenue and addressable indirect spend volume. ACE.
Yeah, it's a great question. Everybody's like, "Who's your ideal customer profile?" And I'm like, "Look, if you're working with suppliers, you're going through it. I mean, I would say most of our customers by design, I would say most procurement teams don't really start forming unless you have about 500 million in like revenue, and then at that point you've got a few hundred million in spend. We're pretty universal though. The reality is, so most of our customers call it 500 million to even 10 billion in revenue right now can fit into the equation pretty quickly. We do have some companies that are pretty large that will roll us out in segments right now, maybe in division or groups, and then as they're trying to expand out. Because the cool part about where you can start with level path is you don't have to go scorch earth and say, hey, we're ripping every product or everything out. You can start in a pretty straightforward, simple use case and grow very quickly from there.
Good. And then, Frost, if you're,
Yes.
Can you be truthful on the amount of time it took you to roll out level path?
I'll mute myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think from the time we executed to like for us playing within the tool, and it was probably about a month. And then I think the biggest piece, right, the guidance I would give kind of the procurement community that might be on the call is, right, like you just have to, the longest pole in the tent was just making sure that the stakeholders know the change that's coming and why, right? So I think for us, right, like to go in and configure stuff, right, like, I have Taylor on my team that's able to go into the tool and configure it on the fly. We have great support working with Level Path, but I think it's just the stakeholder management, the communication around it, because the tool is really easy to use. That's why like we rolled out one case study, right? And then since then, right, like we have stakeholders come into us, say, how do we leverage this workflow management, right? So I think that piece of it is there. And truth be told, I don't even think we have like a user manual associated with it because it's very intuitive in terms of how we've built with the level pad team, how the tool is leveraged. So that's not that piece of it as it looks, as folks evaluate, and look at solutions, right? Like that's not the challenge. For us, we're very cognizant on ensuring that the stakeholders know what's coming and why. And then once they get into the tool, right, like that's the easy part.
Nice. Okay. And then Stan, you mentioned AI being used in procurement. Is it via the ERP or is it embedded in level path?
Yeah, awesome question. We took a unique approach to it. It's actually part of our core engine. We built our own proprietary stack. We call it Hyperbridge, which leverages the most important part. It's the data model underneath, built into the level path, which is why we enrich the data too, because you have so much more to work with at that point. So everything we do is within our product framework. Any data you move in from ERPs will be part of that data set, and then you can use AI in a few different cases. We have it on the workspace, which is where like the activity happens, the sourcing engine, and then the agreements engine today. And then it extends out into many different areas as time goes on. But it's kind of hard to, you almost have to see it like in action, and that's where like Fraud and the team, once they see it, they're like, oh, like I didn't know this could be done through the process. And this is where like folks' eyes light up when they see the ability and the time savings you could have from it.
Good. And may I let people know that they can follow up with you with additional questions? Is that
I think
okay?
that would be okay. Yeah, I think that would be 100% okay, Don. Yeah, feel free to stand at Level Path or obviously LinkedIn and Froz is a wealth of knowledge in the space and how he's partnered with us. He's happy to share. And if I don't want to speak for you, Froz, but pretty sure you'd be happy to share your journey with anybody one-on-one.
Absolutely.
And we're
Please
trying to
reach
get
out.
Froz to the Nashville summit as well. And so if he's there, you'll be able to talk to Froz in
There we
person
go.
as well. So come to the summit. But folks, we are out of time, and I know we have some other questions coming in. We're going to make sure that our presenters have the questions. We'll make sure that you have their contact information, and we will send you a follow-up tomorrow with a link to the recording so you can openly share it with everyone else. And I should have mentioned, we will keep it for 2 years in our SIG Resource Center. So at any time you want to go back and replay it, you'll have access to it in the Resource Center. And with that, I just want to thank Level Path. Stan, it's always so great to have you. And Froz, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you. And just, you've got such a sunny disposition. You just embody ACE. And that's just been so wonderful to have you here. So folks, thank you for joining us for our Power Hour webinar. We only asked for an hour of your time. So we are going to sign off and get you back to your normal workday. So thank you everyone for joining us today, this evening, whatever time it is for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.